Rend, slaughter, devour your enemies. There is no other way to survive. You cannot escape your hunger. Warriors of Purgatory.
Male disposability goes beyond culture, gentlemen. It is biological by design. We were the sex which had to be ready to build, to fight, to kill, and to die for the sake of the tribe, to protect the women folk. And anyone who believes that our genes have had sufficient time to fully adapt to the last several generations, where technology has rendered the need for our immediate sacrifice less immediate, or final, betrays a fundamental lack of any understanding of genetics. I see a lot in MGTOW this question of how we stop or how we end cultural male disposability, but rarely do I ever see what I believe is the more important question. How do we deal with the acute existential recognition of our own? There is an old adage, men are afraid that women will laugh at them, but women are afraid that men will kill them. I think this has held true certainly in the past, and it is esoterically true still. But it's hidden. The human female has a natural proclivity to prioritize her own well-being, and by extension the well-being of her brood. But the human male has more of an evolutionary incentive to prioritize the tangible abstraction of victory, perhaps even at the cost of his own life. There is, I think, a fundamental disconnect in our society between what men say and what women hear. Women tend to laugh at machismo, as I have said, only because the law is now strong enough to protect them. They laugh, in essence, because they just do not understand anymore the depth of conviction within men, the biopsychological mechanism which I believe to be at the root of the reason men seem to kill ourselves far more than women statistically. A man's conviction is only understood either through tangible actionized ritual, which displays male determination, such as status or material accumulation or bodybuilding or some other form of constructivity, which requires discipline and therefore conviction, or else through actual violence. And otherwise women will just never understand. I think their natural disposition these days seems to be to doubt a man's conviction. I often look to the past for masculine wisdom because we're losing it today. Our ancestors understood far better the interplay between the masculine and the feminine. And we see this all the time in the form of rituals of manhood, rites of passage, wherein, as Hugh Mann eloquently put it in a recent video, the umbilical cord to our mothers was severed through ritualized triumph over hardship. Manhood status allowed men to set aside our egos and deal with one another as human beings, but because we nowadays have no man card, so to speak, no metric anymore that is accepted by all of society, man has fallen into the entropy of being entirely wolf to man. In MGTOW it is commonly understood one cannot, due to the transient nature of emotion and due to the female fickle penchant to follow her emotions over her reasoning and then ex post facto rationalize, trust a woman to be faithful to you ever. But you can't trust men either. At least in this society, men have no system of honor, no system of values held up by the tribe as solid and trustworthy, at least by the majority, and then punishing those who don't adhere to that tradition. Indeed, we have potentially through our own wild population expansion grown out of the capacity to establish such a culture at all. And if this is the case, I think MGTOW recognize it. I think this is one of the things I try to honor about this community. We have a culture here, in essence, where the sense of goodwill towards one's fellow man is at least striven for. Regardless of whether we agree, we try and be respectful. There's this intellectual desire to strive and put our best foot forward with one another, even though it doesn't feel natural, and even though we often trip over ourselves like children might. I don't think we're used to attempting to treat other men with the benefit of the doubt. There is a cognizance of our own disposability within the concept of risk for us all, how it relates to our own physiology. I think we're all acutely aware of this. Our hormonal profile itself is punished by aversion to risk. and rewarded by risk. Our minds become saturated with dopamine and testosterone at the completion of a successful risk. And often the proportion of that risk and the proportion of the reward are biologically commensurate, creating almost an addiction loop, so to speak, but an organic one. How do we reconcile the knowledge that risk is, in essence, a dance with death, with our need for it? The higher the risks we take, the more acclimated we become to the highs. There is a desire to find peace and balance in a man, I think, but there is always the dominance thorn in the back of our minds. Like I said in my video on minimalism, if we're quiet, we'll realize we are enough to be happy. No matter what other people try and sell us to the contrary, but what is happiness? Is happiness enough? It's not for me. Maybe I'm just ungrateful for the happiness of my life, but I think there is a general, how do I say this? There's a general acclimatization to whatever environment you come into, wherein no matter what environment you're in, you'll find things that you're happy about, and you'll find things that you struggle with. And then trying to reconcile these two, or trying to be happy or be satisfied, it really just comes down to what outlook you adopt. You have to be the cause of your life, gentlemen, and not the effect. That's what I believe. But regardless, there's always that voice in the back of our minds whispering how we could always be a little better. True excellence and mastery requires risk. We are all aware that we are biologically programmed to be more ready to kill another man over a goal than we would be to kill a woman. It's our innate biopsychology. Many might override this programming, but it is latent within us. We are also then aware of how many men would be ready and sometimes eager to kill us over even a dispute. You see it in the form of anger in other men all the time. We are all like vectors in life, and when the vectors intersect in a way where they stand in one another's way, there's a natural mutual anger, a desire that, if extrapolated out to its logical conclusion, would lead to the death of one of us. Killing and death are the organic extrapolation of a drawn-out, escalated competition between two men who are unwilling to back down when it is unstructured, and neither man can use his rationality, or chooses not to use his rationality, to step back. And this is what we as men have cheekily referred to in the past as the school of hard knocks. There's a coldness about that. But there's a coldness about us. Women love to poke fun of in these retarded articles. How they love to giggle at how emotionally retarded men seem in their eyes. Unwilling to cry, unwilling to open up, unwilling to trust. It's because of how fucking aware we are that the vulnerability we might display could lead to our deaths in an evolutionary psychology sense. Women do not experience this, or if they do, not nearly to any degree that could possibly compare. And so they laugh like fucking retards and write their articles about how emotionally fragile men are, how reliant we become upon a woman. Why do you think a man becomes reliant upon the one woman he pedestalizes? Apart from the economics of sex that cause one-itis, he becomes reliant on her and treats her like an angel because she is literally the only person in his whole life right now whose good intentions he believes he can actually trust. Why do you think men get so fucking angry when they learn about this stuff? The red pill rage, depression, whatever occurs, is because even that lie becomes debunked. You can't trust anyone. And women love to tell me I'm cruel because I womanize. But I womanize, it's because it's all I've got left. It's nice sometimes to immerse myself within a dream I know can't be real for at least a while. Like a video game. And a dream is the answer, I think, I've found to this existential quandary of necessary isolation we have as men. It's not a perfect answer, but it frees me from having to trust anyone, from needing intimacy. And then I'm able to, from a place of abundance rather than lack, deal with people in a healthy way. Challenge is an answer, but for me, a belief that reality is quite literally a dream is the answer I found. I'm not trying to preach it as the gospel or anything like that. You'll see a lot of samurai imagery in my videos. I have a great reverence for the Hagakure and the beliefs of the Zen samurai who held that life and death were actually the same, then lived as if their bodies were already dead. They auto-severed their own connection to their umbilical cords and faced the cold truths of life with a courage I always respected and admired. And people love to scoff, out of perhaps horror, at the notion of seppuku, killing oneself in shame or at the command of their daimyo. I never scoffed at it. That doesn't say I embrace it, but I never scoffed. I understood it. This was the ultimate embrace of male disposability, and in essence, as well, the ultimate rejection of it. The price these men paid for a life free from fear of death, by embracing death every day, ritualizing it until they were not, even if they were afraid, they'd still go through with killing themselves out of shame or for honor. I am not advocating suicide for anyone out there who even remotely thought that that would be the case. But I do think the idea that life is a dream and death eventually will free or awaken us, frees us from the fear of death, and allows us to embrace our lives more holistically and organically. It also frees us from many of the existential quandaries associated with our innate disposability. It encourages a more organic relationship to risk and channels our innate, natural interest to preserve self without fear. It also gives us a healthy, I think, emotional detachment from everything. Yeah, I've said to other people before, it's not that I don't have emotions, it's just that they're floating out there in the galaxy somewhere. As far as I can slice it, the belief that life is only a dream is the only way I've found to ameliorate with any semblance of rational cohesion the angst which emerges from the knowledge of our own impending deaths, our intimate love-hate relationship with risk, and our impossibility to reconcile our desire to be noble with the knowledge of the hatred many feel for us by virtue of simply striving to be an actualized version of ourselves, and expressing our dominant instinct in whatever way we strive towards mastery. There is a zen, there is a peace in the belief that life is only a dream. And I tell myself this like a mantra, regardless of the imperfection of the answer, and regardless of the various ways one might take it apart or put it together logically. In and of itself, I find the answer highly rational and satisfactory in the way that it explains the irreconcilability of what is tangible and what is abstract. Because in the end, there's always a shard there between what we can conceptualize and what we can actualize. It's a pretty fucking important shard. It always has been. Or at least to me. The belief that life is a dream also endows one with great courage against adversity and an emotional detachment to intense situations. After all, if we're all just dancing our way into the ether, we may as well make it a fantastic and interesting dance. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a pleasant evening.